You wake before the others, and something is wrong. The person lying next to you, your mother, your child, the one you slept beside every night of your life, is cold. Too cold. You touch them, and they don't move. And in that instant, a problem opens that no animal before you had ever truly solved, because that body is no longer the person you loved. In a few hours, it becomes something dangerous. The smell will carry for miles, and it will bring the leopards. It will bring sickness into a camp with no medicine. The group has to move, and every instinct screams to leave the body where it lies and go. But you look at them, and you can't. That single moment, the refusal to walk away, might be the oldest evidence of what it means to be human. Not the first tool, not the first fire, the first grave. Today, when someone dies, it's handled. Within hours, professionals you'll never meet arrive, take the body, and give it back to you clean, arranged, inside a box. Most of us will go our whole lives without ever touching a dead body. But for 99% of human history, there were no professionals. There was no one to call. There was only you, the people beside you, and a body you had to decide what to do with, by hand. And what our ancestors chose to do, again and again, for hundreds of thousands of years, makes no survival sense at all, which is exactly why it matters. Start with the cold logic, because our ancestors couldn't ignore it. A dead body is a threat. It rots. It spreads disease through a group living shoulder to shoulder. And above all, it's a beacon. Decomposition releases chemicals a carnivore can smell from astonishing distances. To a hyena or a big cat, a corpse in the open is a free meal and an invitation. So the survival move, the animal move, is simple. Leave and don't look back. Most animals do exactly that. But here's the first strange thing. Not all of them. An elephant that finds the bones of its own kind will stop and stay and run the tip of its trunk over the skull and tusks, sometimes for hours, and come back to the same bones years later. Chimpanzee mothers have been seen carrying their dead infants for days, even weeks, grooming them, refusing to put them down long after the body has begun to fall apart. Grief, it turns out, is older than we are. What humans did was take that grief and turn it into something no animal ever has, a ritual. And they started almost unimaginably early. In a cave in northern Spain, at the bottom of a 13-meter vertical shaft, archaeologists found a pit, and inside it, the bones of at least 28 individuals. The site is called Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones, and it's around 430,000 years old. These weren't Homo sapiens. They weren't even Neanderthals yet. And there is no natural way that many bodies reach the bottom of that shaft. It looks like they were placed there, deliberately, one by one, and with them a single object, a handaxe of rare quartzite in a color found nowhere else in the cave. Researchers nicknamed it Excalibur. It shows no wear. It was never used. It may be the oldest grave offering on Earth, a gift thrown into the dark for people who could no longer hold it. By the time the Neanderthals came, dealing with the dead had become a habit. At Shanidar Cave in the mountains of Iraq, their dead were brought to the same spot again and again. One of them, buried around 70,000 years ago, was found ringed with clumps of ancient pollen, and for decades the story was beautiful, the flower burial, a Neanderthal laid to rest on a bed of wildflowers. It's only fair to be honest here. A 2023 study argued that pollen was more likely carried in by nesting bees, not mourners. The bouquet may be a myth. But the deeper fact survived the scrutiny. The Neanderthals kept bringing their dead to that cave on purpose. At another site, La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France, a Neanderthal was found in 1908, lying in a deliberately dug pit. And these weren't cold, brutish creatures going through the motions. One of the Shanidar Neanderthals, nicknamed Nandi, had a withered arm, a crushed eye socket, and old, healed injuries that would have left him half blind and barely able to fend for himself. He lived for years like that, which means someone fed him, someone protected him. They cared for each other in life. It should be no surprise they cared for each other in death. When our own species begins burying its dead, a new element appears: color. At Kafse Cave in Israel, Homo sapiens were buried around 100,000 years ago, their bodies dusted with red ochre, ground iron oxide, the color of blood. And this is no one-off. From Africa to Europe to Australia, across cultures that never met, the dead are painted red, again and again. Red ochre may be the first symbol our species ever agreed on, the color of life given back to the lifeless. And then grief does something that breaks every rule of survival. It becomes extravagant. At a site called Sungir, near a river in Russia, 2 children were buried around 34,000 years ago, laid head to head. Over their bodies lay more than 10,000 beads, each one carved by hand from mammoth-ivory. Archaeologists tried to reproduce them and found a single bead took around 45 minutes to make. 10,000 beads. That is on the order of 10,000 hours of work, years of someone's life, carved, drilled, and then buried in the ground on children who could never wear them again. No one does that to survive. They did it because the children mattered. Halfway around the world, humans found a completely different answer: fire. At Lake Mungo in Australia, a woman was cremated more than 42,000 years ago. Her body burned, the bones then crushed and buried. She is the oldest known cremation anywhere on Earth. Beside her, a man was laid out full length and covered in red ochre, ochre carried from hundreds of kilometers away. Someone traveled an enormous distance just to bring the color of blood to the dead. Not every answer looks gentle to us now. At Gough's Cave in England, around 14,700 years ago, people ate their dead and shaped the skulls into cups. For a long time, this read as savagery, but the marks on the bones are careful, skilled, almost tender. Butchery done with respect, not rage. In some cultures, eating the dead was the highest honor there was, a way to keep them, literally, inside the living. As recently as the last century, the 4 people of New Guinea did the same, until it spread a fatal brain disease and had to stop. Reverence and horror, it turns out, can wear the very same face. And sometimes the living simply couldn't let go. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, one of the oldest ritual sites ever built, around 11,000 years old, archaeologists found human skulls that had been carefully carved, drilled, and marked long after death. The dead weren't buried and forgotten. They were kept, curated, held close, generation after generation. Now step back and look at all of it at once, because here is the part that should stop you. None of this helped anyone survive. Not one grave, not one bead, not one painted bone ever filled a stomach or won a fight. Every hour spent digging a pit, carving ivory, carrying ochre across a continent, was an hour not spent hunting, or building, or keeping the living alive. By the cold logic we started with, caring for the dead is the single most useless thing our ancestors ever did. And they did it anyway, for 400,000 years, across 3 different human species on every continent they ever reached. So the next time you stand at a grave, or carry a small box of ashes, or just can't bring yourself to delete a dead person's number from your phone, know that you are doing the oldest human thing there is. Older than farming, older than writing, maybe older than our species itself. Every animal on Earth knows how to leave the dead behind. We are the ones who couldn't. We stayed. We dug. We painted them red, gave them our finest things, and told stories over their bones. For someone who could never thank us, never repay us, never even know. Caring for the ones who can do nothing for us in return may be the purest thing we ever invented. Archaeologists have a quiet way of marking where humanity really begins in the record. It isn't the first tool, it isn't the first fire, it's the first grave. There's a new episode every week. Subscribe so you don't miss it.